Welcome to the New World Order Showcase Podcast. Your host, Jill Hart, the coach's alchemist. Couldn't be more excited to have you join us today. On this podcast, we celebrate the champions of change, the up-and-coming life, health and transformational coaches who are fearlessly stepping forward to make a difference in the world. Get ready for inspiring stories, practical tips, and powerful moments that will motivate you to make a positive change in your life and those around you. We're happy to have you join us on this incredible journey as we dive into the world of life, health, and transformational coaches who are lighting up the path towards a better tomorrow.
Hi, and welcome to the New World Order Showcase Podcast. Today we have with us Jill Lerman. Jill is a play and parenting coach, early childhood educator, play expert, and a mom. She empowers overwhelmed parents and caretakers to connect and engage with their little ones through simple developmental play prompts and makes parenting feel more joyful and manageable, empowering you to be the parent you want to be. Welcome to the show, Jill. It is really lovely to have you join us.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
So I teased you with something about our name because we're both
Yes,
Jills.
yes.
I really just wanted to ask you, did you meet a lot of Jills while you were growing up?
So it's interesting, not so many. And I will also say that when I did, they were Jillians and I'm not, I'm just Jill.
I'm just Jill too.
Yeah. So I feel like even when I did, they weren't like exactly the same, but no, not as many as one might think. What about you?
I never met another Jill until I was in my 40s. I
Oh,
mean, at
wow.
all. I never knew another person named Jill or Jillian. I mean, it was just like, I felt like, this is so weird. I have this weird name.
I know that doesn't seem like it would be like so uncommon, right? But yeah, I didn't really meet very many either. And I hadn't really thought about it before till you said it.
Yeah. So there you go.
There you
A
go.
little weirdness in life.
Yeah.
So did you name your children with like multiple syllable names, or did you go with the simple names too?
Funny enough, so right now I have one child and I went with the single syllable, which I also didn't think about until this moment. But her name is Ray.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a nice, short,
Yeah.
easy to spell name.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have 5 children, and the first one I gave 5 names to, and she hates me to this day for that. And she's a girl, and I named her Christopher.
Oh, see, I kind of love that. I love
It
that.
was
I
the
love,
80s.
yeah, I love that. My daughter, even we went with Ray, which is, pretty gender neutral, but
Mhm.
all the names that I was the most attracted to could go either way. And I don't know, I always like that. So I'm into that.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of cool. And then
Yeah.
she was older when I started naming. Well, she and her brother are older, and then the other 3 are younger. So the other 3 are like Bob, Jack, and Sarah. But those are Bob and Jack, they're just nicknames. And when
Okay.
Sarah came along, they're like, no, you're going to name her name, and that's going to be it. So I named her after all the old ladies in the Bible who had children,
I love that.
2 of
Perfect.
them. So, how did you get into this, becoming a parenting
Yeah.
coach?
Yeah, so I was a teacher, an early childhood educator. I taught in preschools in and around the Manhattan area,
Mhm.
and loved it. I worked with mainly toddlers, which everyone thought I was crazy, but I love the toddler stage and also in the parenting centers of those schools. So I did some classes that were just children and then some classes that were parents or caretakers with their children. That was kind
Mhm.
of like a feeder into the school. And I loved it. And I did that for many years. And then the pandemic happened in 2020, which the same week that New York City, where I was living at the time, shut down, was also the week I found out I was pregnant.
Oh.
So it was a crazy time, and we didn't really know what the fate of the world would hold. And I finished out that school year on Zoom, like so many of the my fellow teachers. And in that time, I also was running my own business that was teaching in-person play classes. So, showing people, taking this classroom experience and showing people how they could facilitate experiences like that in their homes.
Mhm.
And then when the pandemic happened, I realized, like, gosh, there's really an opportunity here for me to take this mobile business that I was running, or these experiences of the classroom, and help people bring that into their home, especially now when people with young children were stuck at home, had maybe never spent so much time at home in their lives. And I started to focus on that, using social media and sharing simple play ideas that people could try, using things they had around the house, how they could use toys that they already had in lots of different ways,
Mhm.
so that they weren't feeling inundated with stuff. And it just kind of took off from there. And then when I had my daughter, I just realized how much support, even doing what I did, that people need, because getting through the day just feels really hard. And I wanted to take my experience working with so many families, and then also then my experience now in motherhood, to facilitate that journey for others. And that was kind of how I made the pivot into the coaching space from the classroom space.
I love that a lot. And it's, I think we've evolved as a society where we've gotten away from people having children.
Mm,
For the longest time, it was just like, we'll just send them to daycare.
yes.
Um, and to me, it's like, what's the point of having kids if you're just going to farm out
Mm,
the raising them somewhere else? Um,
mm,
and that was kind of sad. A lot of kids in the 80s went through that, my own included, and I feel terrible about it, but there's nothing you can do about it at this point. But because I think because of that, people like you who have come along and said, hey, there's a better way. You can interact with your kids, and you can, this is how you would raise them, because there were a whole group of us that had no clue. We were
mm,
raised in smaller families,
yeah.
and we were close to our siblings in age, so we didn't have
Mhm.
babies coming up beneath us. That was
Yep.
kind of the beauty of the larger families.
Yep.
The one at the top knew how to take care of babies, and the one at the bottom was starting to take care of the one at the top's kids as they're coming up. So
Yeah.
there was constantly that training of how to take care of the next generation, because it was fluid.
Yep.
We don't live in communities like that anymore. Families are very separated, and they're
Yep.
small. You
Yep.
might have a couple kids at the most, if you're having kids,
Yep.
to run across families that were really large. Like, I live in Idaho now, but I moved to
Oh,
Utah,
wow.
and I used to think I had a lot of kids. But I lived in California and Colorado, and in California and Colorado, 5 kids is a lot. But
Yep.
in Utah and Idaho, it's like, you're the normal
You're like,
person.
yeah, I was going to say it's about average.
It's about average. But yeah, it just, having a resource like what you offer is amazing. So how do
Yeah.
people work with you? Is it like one-on-one in Zoom?
Yeah, so I have a couple of different ways. So one of those ways is in private coaching.
Mhm.
And that's really for people who want just someone there, with them, holding their hand as you're kind of walking through the trenches of parenting. It's a much more in-depth support. So I do offer a 3-month private coaching package, for people that are looking for that. I also offer a membership, which I actually just launched this week, which I'm very excited about. And that was, for someone who maybe doesn't want as much individualized support, but is looking for regular play prompts and ideas of, what do I do with my child all day? I want to create something engaging, but maybe they're not creative in that way, or I don't know how to make the most of what I have, and I don't want to just always have stuff. So it's monthly play prompts and ideas that are open-ended enough to really work across multiple ages and stages, plus a monthly class on a developmental topic or play fundamentals. So you're really getting that deep understanding of what's happening developmentally and how you can support it,
Mhm.
plus Q&A with me. So it's just, another way to have those resources in a very affordable way. So I work with people like that, in that way as well. And then I also do play consultations. So this is for someone who's strictly looking for play support, maybe just some ideas based on what their child is interested in the moment. Hey, how do I use my blocks in a way that's more than just the traditional stacking? Because my child's really into that. So that's another way that I work with people, where I give them a questionnaire. They give me some ideas about what their child's into, what skills they're working on or they're looking to work on. And then I send them a play plan with a bunch of ideas of how to support it.
That's really fascinating. So what age would you say that people should reach out to you? What age should their kids be?
Yeah, so it's a great question. Honestly, at any time. And I would say I work with people who are pregnant,
Mhm.
and they're preparing. I
Yeah.
work with people that have newborns through, I'd say the sweet spot is really through like 6, 7,
Mhm.
is the sweet spot. But it's never too late. And that's the beauty of it. When it comes to building play skills, you can start from birth. If you've never really worked on that, but want to facilitate that, particularly with independent play and your child really, self-starting and leading, that's a skill that you can build at any point as well. So, I would say probably the vast majority of people I work with have children 4 and under. But I do work with clients who have children till about like 6, 7 years old as well.
And those are such formative years. I know we say that, but
Yes.
I think that people, when you're just, when you bring that baby home, it suddenly is like, oh,
Yep.
oh, they're a little human being. And
Yes.
even before they're born, it's like
Oh,
conception
yeah.
on.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
all of the pieces are so important to
It's
the
so true.
development of who they're going to be as a human
Yep.
being, as an adult.
Yep.
And it's,
Yep.
you're just looking at
And
this
and
thing
they're
that doesn't
showing
know.
you who they are from, I mean, gosh, when I'm it's like a side story, but I feel like it's appropriate. So my daughter, I found out at 36 weeks was breech. And, I was doing all the exercises, laying down on the ironing board, doing all these things, like trying to get her to turn, all the things that were recommended. And she didn't, and I ended up, having a scheduled C-section. But all this to
Mhm.
say, when I met her, I was like, oh, there was no way she was turning. She is so headstrong. She's independent. She knows who she is. When she's comfortable and has found her way with something, she does not want to be interrupted. And when I got to know her, and as I continue to get to know her, I'm like, gosh, that was there from in the womb. Like, had I known it at the time, I would have been like, oh yeah, there's no way this child's turning. Like, save yourself the grief of laying upside down and trying to get her to move.
And I applaud your ability to have peace with the situation. So many times we want to just force our kids to do things the way we want them to do it, including being born. Like,
Oh,
no, I'm going to have this child naturally.
yeah.
And to me, I am a trained doula. To
Oh,
me,
is
if
that
you get
right?
that kid out and it's
Yes.
breathing, that was a
Yes.
natural
That was a
childbirth.
natural,
You did
100%
it,
agree.
girl. Go
Yes.
for it.
So true.
And if you can
So true.
breastfeed, great. If you can't, your job is to make sure they get nutrition.
Yes, that's right.
However that happens. I
Yes.
have daughters that they pumped. They couldn't be bothered with sitting there and feeding the baby. And they wanted to have, other people be able to feed the baby.
Yeah.
So they breastfed him, but it was in a bottle.
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
works for them. It's
Yeah.
like, you know,
And that's what
whatever.
it's all about, right?
Yeah.
Like finding what works for you. And I
Yeah.
think that, like, to your point, so much of my approach in the way I work with families, and certainly in the way that I try to parent myself, is, is to follow the child's lead. And,
Yes.
that they're giving us information, like we said, like from the womb, about who they are. And, I feel like when we see a child for who they are, and we respect them and their individual journey, and we give them the space and the confidence to grow into the person that they are meant to be, not who
Mhm.
we think they should be, but who they are meant to be. That's that's when amazing things happen. And I think that's what parenting is really all about. And often, as it pertains to like the work that I do, and specifically in play, but really just in parenting, period, children are so much more likely when it comes to their play to engage for longer periods of time when it's something that follows their interests. And sometimes we have these ideas, well meaning, of course, but like about what play is supposed to look like, what they're supposed to be doing. And when they're not doing that, we don't think they're like doing it right, or that we're failing in some way. And, gosh, especially with young kids, with toddlers, play isn't always, they sit quietly and they're stocking and building a block tower, or they're sitting quietly and coloring. No, sometimes it's dumping bins out, just dumping them, knocking every book off the bookshelf. I would venture to say that's play for a toddler. Walking around talking to oneself, that can be considered play. And I think that when we open our minds to really to seeing our child wherever they are in that given moment, and supporting that, that's when the magic really happens in parenting.
And not feeling the need to compare your child to anybody else's journey, because your
That's right.
child is unique. It's not going to
That's
be
right.
like its siblings.
Yeah.
Every one of them is different. Everyone is
Yeah.
here for a different purpose.
Yeah.
And the sooner that you can clue into that and just relax with it, the better. And I'm
Yes.
I'm all about the homeschooling movement and
Hmm.
not doing school at home, but letting your kids having at this point in my life, I've launched 5 human beings out into the world. They are all amazing people contributing to making the world a better place, and they're
Hmm.
doing well. They're doing well financially, if you want to like measure it, if you use that as a measuring tool.
Yeah.
I didn't, the last 3, I pretty much let them direct their education. You can learn everything you need to know in 2 years. I dumped them into an alternative school. They made A's and they got out at 16. So that head start on the rest of their life, but they got
Wow.
that silly little piece of paper, and I
Mm.
got affirmed that, hey, I didn't do too bad a job.
Mm.
Letting them be who they were, not
Yes.
trying to force them to go to school and be told they were wrong and they're doing this, they didn't measure up to some nebulous standard, and they didn't repeat back the things that they were supposed to repeat back because
Yeah.
somebody said this is what the answer is supposed to be. The answer can
Yes.
be whatever you want it to be.
That's right. And the people, it's such an interesting thing, because I think when it comes to children,
Mhm.
that we often, when they like quote get out of line, or they're not, fitting into the box, that we kind of condemn this. We see it as
Right.
problematic. We see them as
Right.
challenging. We see them as all these different things. But all of like the amazing people that are changing the world, right? The people that have the foresight to do something differently, whether that is in career or whatever it might be,
Mhm.
these are people that are stepping outside of, they're crossing the line, they're stepping outside the box, they're
Mhm.
looking at things in a way that someone else isn't. And it's just so interesting to me that when we look at our children, we see those things as negative, but then those are the qualities we want to see as adults. And I think that, like, when I think about all the children I've worked with as a classroom teacher, I see it in my own daughter and now the families I support, it's like when we when we look at children and we are saying we want those things, but then we don't want them to push back. We don't want to hear, that they're not listening. We don't want, it's like, well, you can't really have both. You have to accept, I mean, gosh, my daughter gives it to me in terms of like, she will push back and she's testing boundaries and all these things. And even though it's difficult in the moment, and I'm not gonna lie, like, and act like it isn't, it is. I have to remind myself, like, I want her to go out in the world and do that. And if I want her to do that out in the world, then I have to be okay with it being safe for her to respectfully do that with me. And I think that that's so true, with our kids, whether it's about their learning styles, their behavior. If that's what we want to see in the future, we have to think about how we foster that from the beginning. Because if we're constantly trying to put everybody in the same box, it's going to be that much harder than when they get older to then want to break free of that. They've been taught over a very long period of time, especially from the most trusted people in their life, that they're supposed to make themselves smaller, right? So if that isn't what we want, and I think most parents don't, we do have to think about what that then means.
It, his name escapes me. Peterson, Jordan Peterson. He
Mm-hmm.
has the 10 rules for parenting. Um, or maybe it's not about parenting, but there's one rule that he had in there. It was just like, this is golden. I wish I could give this to everybody. And I tell it to all my children. In fact, I gave all my children this book for this one rule. And the one rule was, it was around not letting your children do things that irritated you. And that was the only thing you had to worry about with your kids. Just teach them, in essence, teach them what your boundaries are and hold your boundaries. Teach them that, these are the things that I will not tolerate. That there will be repercussions if you cross these boundaries. But you know what they are, and you know what the consequence is going to be for those boundaries. But I, in turn, will respect your boundaries. And that is really crucial, that you teach children that boundaries are to be respected, and it goes both ways.
Yes,
I'm
that's
not going to
right.
make you do something that
That's
you
right.
just fundamentally are not equipped to do, and
That's
you
right.
don't like it. It's
Yeah.
not it's not fair to them. And what it teaches them is that, boundaries are conditional.
Yes. Yes.
But
That's
if
right. No, it's so, what you're saying is so huge. And I think about this even in terms of like, gosh, I mean, I think about it in terms of like physical affection.
Mhm,
And like if a child does not want to be hugged,
mhm,
think about if it was another adult. If an adult didn't want to be touched, we would respect that boundary. But with
yeah,
children, think about how often the expectation is just like, go hug so and so, go hug your aunt, go hug your friend, go hug. And it's like, well, what, maybe they don't want to. And like, shouldn't we be then instead, teaching our children to politely decline that when they don't feel comfortable? And doesn't that then translate down the line to, this doesn't feel right in my body and I'm going to say so, and people should respect that when I say so, as
yeah,
opposed to the expectation of they want that, so I should be doing that. So then how does that translate then down the line, right? I mean, in terms of body autonomy and what feels right to me or doesn't, and respecting my body and respecting others. And I think about that all the time. I think about it in terms of like fullness at meals, right?
mhm.
Like where
Or
there's
wanting
such,
to eat things.
right, exactly. Where I'm like, oh gosh, like, of course, yes, on the one hand, it's our responsibility as parents. We want to make sure our children are getting nutrition and, we are overseeing their health and their well-being. But then I think to myself, like, there are times that I'm just not in the mood to eat something. Why should it be different? Or, sometimes something just doesn't agree with me. I don't like the consistency of that. So why is that okay for me as an adult, but a child has to eat it because I put it on their plate?
Yeah.
Right. So I think about that all the time. And like, it doesn't mean, I think the other side of this is, it doesn't mean that our children just, run the show and there's no rules and there's no boundaries. But I think that taking their feelings into account, right? The same way we would hope that our feelings would be taken into account, that is the recipe for, creating a human being that will then be able to grow into an adult to do the same thing. And I think about it all the time. And I catch myself, because I think it's like we fall into just that's the pattern. And I have to kind of remind myself of that. The same thing with like jackets. Sometimes my daughter will not put on a coat. And I'm like, well, I could like hold her down and force, or we can see, all right, your body. Let's see how your body feels. I'm going to bring your coat. I think it's pretty cold out there, but you see how you feel when you get outside. And what happens 9 out of 10 times? She then asks for her coat if she's cold and she puts it on. But the difference between, that she's trusting what she feels inside, and then that's coming
Yeah.
from her versus it being forced from me, that's a big distinction.
It's allowing her to make some decisions early on. It helps people figure out decision making.
Yes,
And it's a skill that a lot of kids don't learn until much
yes,
later because they're never
yes,
given the opportunity to make a choice.
that's
And
right.
simple choices like, which pair of socks would you like to wear today? It
That's right.
doesn't matter what the answer is. They're
Yes,
making a decision. And
that's
being
right.
able to make decisions is a huge adulting skill that
Absolutely.
so many
Absolutely.
people reach that point and they're just like, well, I don't know. What do you want to do?
And they don't know how to trust that inner voice. And to your point, I love that example you gave, because when I zoom out from that, I'm saying, so we're making it very clear we're going to put on socks. You can choose, do you want the
Yeah.
blue socks or the red socks? And I think this is, again, a place that sometimes this idea of, parenting from a respectful place gets misunderstood, because it gets interpreted as that the child says no socks and they run off and they never don't have to put on shoes or socks and they do what they want to do. And it's
No.
like, no, there's a clear line. We are putting on socks and shoes because we're going outside. You can choose which socks you wear. Do you want these or these? And, I think finding the places to implement choice throughout the day just makes such a huge difference with power struggles in other places, because they're having an opportunity to have a say in their life. Right. And, as human beings, we all crave that. We crave that from the time we're young, and the same way that we crave that as adults. And, I think finding the places for that is so key. We're going to have a snack. Do you want the pretzels or do you want the apple chips? Right? Snack time is now, but you can choose which snack. That's just another example because maybe they're not
Yeah.
hungry. But
And if they're not hungry, fine. When
yes,
you get hungry, these are your choices.
these are your choices.
Which do you think you want me to pack
That's right.
for later? It, it,
That's
it
right.
lets them be in control of their life
Yes.
in smaller areas. And then as they grow, they'll be able to make bigger choices. Like,
Yes.
do I want to go to this party where I know there's going to be drinking? Or do I
Yeah.
want to say, nah, I think not? And
Yes.
they'll they'll already know how to make decisions.
That's
They'll
right.
they'll feel like, what does it feel right for me? And they won't
Yes.
feel like they have to hide things from you because you've already taught them, this is a decision-making process.
Hmm.
I know that when you get to this stage, you're going to be faced with some other choices
Yeah.
that may impact your life in ways that you don't want it to impact your life. But
Yeah.
you've already made these littler choices along the way, and the choices that you're making are, getting bigger. Like, which
Yes.
kinds of classes do you want to study?
Yes.
What
Yes.
kinds of books do you want to read?
Yeah.
You're going to read a book, but you can pick which kind.
That's right.
And so you're starting to develop bigger and more complete pictures for them about
That's right.
how things look on the other side of these decisions that they make.
Yes. Absolutely.
So, and it all starts with play.
It does. It does. I feel like everything does. I mean, that was one of the things that got me into this was I saw again and again that play was the way that children learned best. And it was how they were making sense of the world around them, and, how they were, processing things, processing feelings. And I just watched again and again and again as a teacher, just how things came alive at the hands of the children. And now I feel really lucky that I get to help people facilitate that and see that magic in their home, as they kind of support their own families' play journeys.
I love that so much. So you do offer people a guide to independent play at
Yes.
any age, and this is free and it's on your website. You want to talk about that
Yes.
just a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, independent play is a huge part of the work I do. It's also as a mom who freelances, but is also the primary caretaker. It's how I work. It's how I, can make my business happen while also raising my daughter. And I feel like it is one of the greatest tools that any parent can have in their toolbox. I think often people will hear independent play and they feel like, I don't know, gosh, am I neglecting my child? Or, what is that like? What does that even look like? My child's really young. And what we don't realize is that even with the best intentions as adults, when we get involved in our child's play, we change it. We have different skills than they do. We have a different realm of knowledge. And we also come in with this idea of we know how something is maybe, supposed to be played with, whereas our children see unlimited possibilities, even with everyday objects. They see ways for things to come together that we don't as adults. And so when we let them lead the way in their play, this is really where the magic happens, where the problem solving happens, the creativity happens. So this is actually something we really want to encourage, and that actually majorly supports them in their development of all the skills to come. So in this free guide, I gave some of my tried and true tips of how you can see and facilitate more independent play at home. Some things are around even where play happens in your home. Often we think that if our child is going to play on their own, that it means they're off in the other room doing their own thing while we're doing ours. Not necessarily so, right? And kind of getting creative with what that looks like, having an understanding of what a developmentally appropriate amount of time is for a child to play at each age and stage. And the kinds of things that we can do to support them. And like most of the things in my work, I really like this to be low lift, but big impact. Because I know as
Love that.
parents who are overwhelmed, right? We're busy, we're burnt out, or kind of bordering on burnt out a lot of the time. And I don't want play or supporting play to feel like another thing that then falls on us. So these are things that are like under 2 minutes, that you can do that will have a huge impact overall in your child's ability to engage independently.
And from what you're saying, it seems like they're kind of prompts to help your child get started.
Yes,
And it's really just about getting them started because they'll
that's
go
right.
for it. Like,
That's right. And it's so true, Jill. And, I think so. I like to use, I like to always like relate it to experiences that we can understand as adults. So I think about like when I'm really hungry, and I go into a pantry full of food options, many of which I like to eat, but I'm at that level of hungry. I can't even like think about what I want at that point, right? And I
mhm,
think our children with their play, it's the same thing. They want to play. They want to, get started, but sometimes it's just overwhelming. That could be the amount of stuff you have. It could be the way it's set up. It could just be, even if you're perfectly organized, that it's just an overwhelming process. So
mhm.
sometimes it's just about the little something to kickstart it. And that's a big part of the work I do, is in helping families, sometimes giving ideas for what those prompts could be, that many children would enjoy. And sometimes it's about how to help you become that active observer. So then what your child's play prompt would be, or what will get them started. Because we are all unique individuals, and the same is true for our children. And you can kind of figure out what your child's play superpower is, or what's going to work for them. But it's about knowing how to find that. And yeah, I think our children want to play, but sometimes we assume that they should be able to just go. And some children can. And many, I would say the vast majority, need some support. And that support could be as simple as we put something out that they use all the time, but in a place that they're not used to seeing it, or in combination with something else that's like, what's that, right? My animals are next to my blocks. That's different, right? Or, hey, my blocks are over there up on the table. I'm pointing my daughter's child-sized table. They're up on the table rather than on the floor. That's something. It's just enough to like spark it and get it going, and then they will take it from there. That's what I see as our role as the adults in play. It's about we
Mhm.
facilitate the environment. We can, do all these things to kind of get it started. And then the play itself, that's their work. That's their department. That's where we can then take that step back and follow their lead. But they often do need that little something just to get it going.
It reminds me of, we have this coffee table that one of my sons has, and his son, who's about 3.5 now, when he was maybe 18 months, we go over there all the time and babysit. So, which is just really code for they let us play with their kids. So there's a hole, a knot hole in this coffee table, and it's indestructible. So, and he had these little things that like necklaces, and he discovered how much fun it is to push things through this hole. And it comes out the
Oh,
bottom,
yeah.
but then you
Yeah.
get to find it. It's always adventure to
Yes.
find it. And this game still goes on to this day. I mean,
Oh,
18
I'm
months later,
sure. Yeah.
years later, he still loves to stick things in there. It's different things now, but it's like it's the magic.
Yes.
An everyday thing that exists in their environment that is endless fun,
Yes.
but it's
Yes.
about
And
exploring and
it is. And about, figuring out like how does this thing work? And as you're saying this to me, because this is just like how my brain works, now I'm thinking of all these other activities or prompts that you could do that are like that are like a posting activity, something, or what fits, right?
yeah.
Having things of different sizes with different containers, what fits through what opening, what goes in here, what can come out one side or the other. Like now my head is going of, oh, I know what that child would want to do, like a good extension of that. And I think
He's
that's
totally an
right. Like that's
explorer
kind of
kind
the
of kid.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's where that, observation comes in, where you pick up on these things. And once you become really attuned to it, you're like, oh, I know, now knowing this about them, I know this other thing that they would like. And I think sometimes what I love about the example you're giving is, often we'll look at something like this and we'll come back with like, oh, they like cars or they like their animals. And that's completely a valid answer. But when
Mhm.
we like really look in depth, that's when we start to notice things like the detail you're describing. And there's play opportunity in these things that are unconventional, right? That aren't necessarily toys or traditional materials, but
Mhm.
the exploration is really what it's about. My daughter, when she was an infant, used to be obsessed with, she must have been, gosh, like, I don't know, 3 months old. And she was obsessed with the drawstrings on sweatshirts. Her
Mhm.
eyes would just get so huge and she would bat at it. And when she was working on reaching and grasping, she would want to
Mhm.
pull. And so just because of how my head works, I was like, I want to find a way to translate that into a play experience, which for us was I tied strands of ribbon from her play gym and I
Mhm.
placed her under it. And you could like her face just lit up. And this a couple of months old. And what I saw in that moment was like, she feels seen. She
Mhm.
feels like you saw this thing that I love and you made this experience just for me. And
Mhm.
that for me is what these play prompts are about.
Yep.
For a child to feel connection, it doesn't only have to be us playing with them in these traditional ways that we're
Mhm.
used to seeing. That's one way. But there's so many other ways to connect. And one of the ways can be that you set out something thoughtful that they would love based on what you're noticing about them and their
Mhm.
interests. And that is connection. And then letting them and trusting them to lead the way on how to explore that. And that I feel like is a huge part of what I'm trying to support families in seeing.
I love that. I love that so much. I'm having so much fun with these three little grandsons that I have that are
Yeah.
local to me. And they're all different and they're all at different stages, but just in the conversation, I'm remembering different things that I've had the opportunity to interact with them. And it just I know that they love me and they want to be around me because I do see them, and I
Mm,
do, like, I bought him bells, jingle bells, because he loved noise, all
yes.
kinds of noises. And he still will bring me the jingle bells. It's like, I know you gave this to me. So
Oh,
it's,
it warms my heart.
yeah, but anybody can do that, whether you're a
Yes,
grandparent or a parent.
that's right.
It's like just noticing them. And
Yes,
that's really the key. It's just
it
seeing
is.
them for who
It
they are
is.
and letting them be.
Exactly. Exactly. And honoring that
Mhm.
and, and letting them know that you see that, um, is so huge. I even like sometimes, I mean, I don't like to interrupt a child's process, but I love when like a child's working on, I don't know, maybe they're coloring something or painting something.
Mm.
And you just watch. And then when they're done, right? Because we don't want to interrupt their work, but when they're done, just saying, I'm noticing, and then X. Those are like two of my favorite words. I noticed, or
Yeah.
I'm noticing, right? It's not making an assumption about what they drew. Oh, you made a cat. No, right? It's just, I'm noticing, wow, you use so many different colors. Can you tell me about that? Or they built
Yes.
a tower. I'm noticing that this part over here is going out really wide, and then this part gets a little smaller. Can you tell me about that? It's about like honoring those details, not deciding what we think they were trying to do, right? Because I think
Yeah.
sometimes we think that we're doing the I'm noticing when we do that, but rather not making any assumption and letting them lead the way, but letting them know, hey, I saw that you did this, and I think that's really cool. I mean, think about like, I'm just thinking even now, like as an adult, when someone says something like that to me, like, I
Mhm.
noticed you did X, like, wow. Like, I'm like, thank you. Like, it makes you get all like the little tingles in your heart. Like, wow, you see me. And yes, I did do that. And thank you for seeing that. And our children are no different.
Mhm.
So as you're saying this with the jingle bells, I'm like, he's communicating in his way. You got me this thing that I really love, and you knew I would love it. And I'm showing you, I remember that you gave it to me. I mean, how
Yeah.
amazing is that for such a young child?
Yeah. And it's not like it's special. Just it's the only thing. It's only for me. Everybody
Yes.
can do this. I just
Yes.
just like
That's
it's just
right.
taking a moment and noticing and asking questions, getting them
That's
to
right.
communicate with you.
That's right.
And children can communicate very early,
Oh, yes.
whether they
Yes.
have words or not.
100%. And I think that, like we were saying earlier, they are showing us who they are
Mhm.
right from the start, and just, willing us to see them and, to hear them. And they communicate so much from long before they have the words to tell us.
Yeah. Yeah. This has been an amazing conversation. I have really enjoyed it,
I
Jill.
know, I did too.
So what's the one, only the one thing that you hope
I know we
the
covered
audience
so
takes
much.
away from the conversation? Exactly.
Gosh, I think, the biggest thing would be that it doesn't have to be complicated to be meaningful. And I think that that goes certainly in terms of play, and materials we use in play. So it applies there, but I think it just applies in parenting, period. We feel so much pressure, and we put so much pressure on ourselves as parents that we constantly have to be doing and getting. And, we're always seeing on social media what other people are doing. And it's so easy to feel like you're not doing enough, or to feel guilty. And, I think that when people realize that it's not about reinventing the wheel, that your child just wants that connection from you, and that can come in many forms, and we don't have to make it harder on ourselves. Just leaning into simplicity, and presence, I feel like, is key.
I agree 100%. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning in to another empowering episode of the You World Order Showcase podcast. We hope you've enjoyed hearing from our incredible life, health, and transformational coaches who are making a profound impact on the world. Remember, change begins with you, and you have the power to transform your life and the lives of others. If you want to take that next step and unlock your true potential, visit thecoachesalchemist.com, where you can find the 3 ways we can help you for free to spin your talent into gold with clarity, a system, and a plan. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an inspiring episode. And if you enjoyed today's show, we'd greatly appreciate it if you could leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback means the world to us and helps us reach more people with our positive message. Stay connected with us on social media for updates, behind-the-scenes content, and upcoming guest announcements. You can find us on Facebook at the U World Order or simply visit thecoachesalchemist.com.